This day is given to us beyond anything we could create or earn, whether deserved or undeserved. We receive this day as a gift from the universe, a gift from God, a gift from life itself. So come and let us worship with gratitude for this and so many gifts, with humility for our shortcomings, and with hope that we will continue to transform our lives and to transform our world. Now, let us rise and sing together. If you like to use your hymnal, number 239, Go Tell It on the Mountain.
Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. While shepherds kept their watching, or silent flocks by night, behold, throughout the heavens there shone a holy light. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. The shepherds feared and trembled when low above the earth rang out the angel chorus that hailed our Savior's birth. Go tell it on the mountains, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. Down in a lonely stable, the humble Christ was born, and that sent us salvation, that blessed Christmas morn. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born.
So welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. Got a lot of announcements for you, so just kind of hold with me on this. First things first, December 9th, there is at 6 o'clock here, the Social Justice Committee is hosting an informational session on the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board's redistricting process. It'll be streamed online, but this is a real significant thing that we're about to take part in. And this church needs to be informed. So that's 6 o'clock this Thursday, online, but also here in person. Also, if you are watching us live, we streamed the 9 o'clock service, but we streamed it to the website only and not to YouTube. We made an offering to the tech gods, and the offering was not well received, so we're doing it again. So that means for those of you who found us accidentally or just waited this long, thank you, we're glad you're with us. And that means for those of you who are here, the only time this is really going to be an issue is when we do stones. You will be on camera if you come up to do the stones. So that's the only thing to kind of know. All right, here comes the things. Next week between services, we are having tables set up to decorate ornaments. Is this correct? Yes. For the tree. So if you have not yet made an ornament for the tree, next week is your chance. I want to talk about this basket. You are a wonderful church, but you're not great at turning in your pledge cards on time. Pledge drive ended a month and a half ago, and we are still missing almost 2/3 of you. So I talked to a colleague, and she said, you're never going to get all the pledge cards unless you give them something. So here's the something. We are going to raffle off this basket of things we found around the church. Quite literally, Nothing in this basket was paid for. They're just things we found somewhere in the church. But there's really cool stuff. There may actually even be a brick in here from the original building. Now you may be wondering, how do I get in on this sweet, sweet raffle? Well, I'm glad that you asked. You take a pledge card and fill it out and turn it in, and that's all you have to do. But then you may be asking, I already turned in a pledge card. This doesn't seem fair that everyone who didn't turn in their pledge card gets entered into a raffle. Well, not to worry, you, whoever is in my head telling me this. You are also entered into the raffle by virtue of turning in your pledge card. But I want to have 2 raffle tickets, you might say. Well, I have good news for you on that one as well. If you can convince a church member who has not turned in their pledge card to turn in a pledge card and then give you their raffle ticket, you can have 2 chances to win this. December 19th is when we're going to do the drawing. So December 18th is your last chance to get your pledge card in, not to pay for the church. We need you even after this raffle. But if you want to get this mystery basket of things, which you can see after the service, or for those of you online, come up next week and you can see it right here for you. All right. You ready for the Christmas stuff? This Sunday is normal. With due respect, next Sunday is normal. I know because I'm preaching that one. So we have 2 normal Sundays left. Then things get weird. So the 19th, we're going to do the impromptu pageant, kind of. Usually what we do is we'd pull you out of the congregation, have you go in the back, get you dressed in a very COVID spready kind of way, come back up and have you all come stand as close together as possible to share your aerosols as much as we can. We're not going to do it that way. We have a pretty good idea how we're going to do it, but we haven't figured it out yet. So the 19th will be the impromptu pageant. That will be COVID safe, period. The 20th, the next day, will be the solstice service at 7 o'clock in the sanctuary, and that will also be available online. So just know that that will be the next sort of offering. Then on Christmas Eve, the 24th, we cannot put 300 people in this room. So we are going to offer you 3 services, one at 4:30, one at 6, and one at 7:45. The 4:30, and you have to RSVP for whichever one you want. The 4:30 and the 6 o'clock, those are going to be, we're calling them carols and candles. It's really the whole service, we're just condensing it. And the 7:45 is the service you come to expect. That one is also going to be streamed online. But we need a thing for it. You also got, there's a lot of dates. 9th, the info session, 19th for this and the pageant, 20th for solstice, 24th for Christmas Eve. Here's the request I need for Christmas Eve in by the 19th. Not everyone comes to that service, nor do we want everyone to this year. So even if you're coming and you just want to be on video, what we're going to do during the candle lighting is I'm going to ask you, those of you who are gathered now and those of you watching online, take a video yourself holding a candle, have a candle lit off screen, light it off screen, this is a video, and then just go like this and pass it. And we're going to make a video montage like we did last year of Unitarian Universalists from all over the world who are members of this church or loosely affiliated, passing candles. So if you could do that, that would be wonderful. Have that in by the 19th. Is that enough? Do y'all feel adequately welcomed? One other thing. COVID cases are rising. I think it's because of Thanksgiving. If we go over the 25 cases per 100,000 threshold, we're just going to go do the stuff outside. Everything else is the same. Well, nothing is the same. I mean, everything will be outside. But we're going to have service just like we would. It'll just be outside. Good? We also have an announcement from our intern minister, Leslie Runnels.
Good morning, friends. Just wanted to remind you about the art as spiritual practice classes that we're having. We've been making some beautiful art together. Check that one out. And how about that one? So we'll be meeting on this Tuesday coming up, December 7th at 5:30 p.m. in the large classroom number 1. And feel free to come through at any time. If you can't get there by 5:30, that's fine. And we're just gonna make some art together. We'll have a prompt to work with, And you can follow along with what I'm doing, or you can do your own thing and let your heart explore as it wants to explore. And we will also, ooh, look at that one. We'll also be having one on December 19th on the Sunday between 10:15 and 11:15 during the middle hour. So please come play with us then. And if you've been before, don't forget to bring your journal back with you so we can keep filling it up. And art as spiritual practice, we use this art journaling as a way to think about what we're going through right now and what does art have to reveal about what we might be learning about ourselves, whether we're in a time of joy or sorrow, discernment, in the midst of a move, whether that's to a job or a new house, a new country, whatever that might be. So come play with us. We'd love to see you.
The newer for us tradition, but that has been spreading to more and more UU churches in recent years, of celebrating Advent, of marking this time leading up to Christmas, is a time of thinking what it means to look forward, to anticipate, both to wait patiently, sometimes less patiently, and also to prepare for what's to come. And there are many reflections, many ways of ordering the reflections that we enter into as we light the candles on the Advent wreath, our symbol. This reading, the set of readings that we're using this year, written by a UU minister, are all based actually on the verses of one of the carols that we're going to be singing later in today's service, O Come, O Come, Emmanuel. So for this second Sunday of Advent, as Nathan lights the candles, I offer these words. Spirit of truth, come in. For in our world and in ourselves there is conflict. Too many lives form the battleground of the struggle for justice and power. Grant us patience as we keep on moving forward, never turning back. Give us a common dream. Fill us with peace. Fill us with the truth of this season.
And today also, we are thinking of a few people. First is Rebecca Cummings is recovering from surgery. The second is yesterday at 10 o'clock, we had a service for Thomas Bryant St. George. He was members of this church, Christina and Brian, their son, he was born 22 weeks and didn't make it. And so we had a service for him yesterday. And if you would place a stone, Henry Tillman's aunt, Joanne Felton, also died recently. So we're thinking of her and him and their family. This ritual is open to everyone, visitor and member alike. We invite those who wish to come forward either along the east or the west wall. Take a stone, let it represent whatever's on your heart, whatever may be keeping you from being present, whatever work you have to do. Place it in the chalice bowl. Maybe release it, be with us, be a little more present. We now invite those who wish to come forward as we place stones. And as you light your chalices at home, we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
I'll start by naming a perception I've heard this week from a couple of people. I don't think it's quite true, but anyone today I do think can be forgiven for believing it, and that's this. The world's gotten a lot more chaotic this week, and it certainly can seem that way on the surface. I think of the news spreading like wildfire about the Omicron variant of COVID that is starting to surge in many places. The first case was spotted in Louisiana just a day or two ago, and has many of us really understandably anxious about what it will mean for the future, particularly for loved ones who may be vulnerable to infection, but also what it will mean for all of us socially as we look to continue the measures that have kept many safe, but have been so frustrating at the same time. I think of the political climate, the legal climate, the incredible amount of discussion, though understandably a high amount of discussion, about the recent case heard at the Supreme Court, which has many pundits believing that the court is likely soon to strike down the Roe v. Wade ruling of 48 years ago, which will radically change the protections for reproductive rights in this country in ways that people across the political spectrum are talking about in great detail. And so much else happening as well. So much that could be named. I'm sure many of you have aspects of your lives or your worlds, including the fact of the time of year. December is an incredibly intense and, for many, fraught time, one which can bring up emotional attachments and memories from long past that impact us in strong ways. And it can be hard to deal with those. It's hard to live through those for so many of us. And yet, we have this practice of marking this time of waiting, this time of anticipation for something new to come. And I want to note that while there is, of course, important differences, there's also a little bit of overlap with another celebration happening this week, Hanukkah. In the Jewish tradition, Hanukkah celebrates the defeat of the Greeks who had taken over the temple and the reclamation of the temple. And many of us know the miracle story of the lamp being lit, believing there was only enough oil for one night, but it lasted for 8 nights, long enough to make more oil so that the eternal flame in the temple could indeed once again burn eternally. The underlying meaning is it was a time when the Jewish people were able to reclaim their religious practices after having been denied them for so long. And after such a great time of waiting, were able finally to reassert their identity. Advent is this time of waiting for the birth of Jesus and while it makes some Unitarian Universalists uncomfortable and others just find it not meaningful, there are some in the Christian tradition, out of which UUism emerged, who see this time of Advent as a time of waiting for the second coming, or for the coming of what is often referred to in Christian parlance as the kingdom of God. Now, that language sticks with a lot of us, and I find it on the surface problematic myself. It's hierarchical, it's patriarchal, and underneath it, I've come to hear an incredible value that I think speaks to us as Unitarian Universalists as well, because this time of waiting, of anticipation and preparation can be of preparing for and waiting for a better world to come. And in the moments when the world seems especially fraught, be it more so this week or not, it's all the more meaningful to think about what it means for us to be waiting for and getting ready for a better world to come. I'm going to spend some time unpacking and illustrating in the next part of the sermon how times of waiting for change can be approached in different ways. And I'll do so using a story that you might not expect me to draw from for an Advent sermon, which begins with this reading.
In the capital, all they have known is panem et circenses. What's that? I recognize panem, of course, but the rest is nonsense. It's a saying from thousands of years ago, written in a language called Latin about a place called Rome, he explains. Panem et circenses translates into bread and circuses. The writer was saying that in return for full bellies and entertainment, his people had given up their political responsibilities and therefore their power. I think about the capital, the excess of food, and the ultimate entertainment, the Hunger Games. So that's what the districts are for, to provide the bread and the circuses. Yes, and as long as that kept rolling in, the capital could control its little empire.
So, first, give me a moment, those of you who are familiar with the story, because I do need to unpack it a little bit for those who are not. The Hunger Games was a series of young adult fiction novels that came out starting, I think 2008 or so was the first one, and have become very popular, a trio of books that was eventually made into 4 popular movies. The story is set in the future, in a dystopian future, in what used to be North America, but is now known as Panem, where of the land that is left after the seas rose, there is a capital, a wealthy, affluent capital located approximately where Denver is currently located, and the rest of the land is divided into 12 different districts. And each of the districts at varying levels of poverty are providing the materials for Panem, and particularly for the capital, who really is flourishing, whereas most of the rest of the country is not. The story starts in the poorest of the districts, District 12, and focuses on a 16-year-old girl, Katniss Everdeen, who has been learning how to hunt for her family by sneaking off beyond the boundaries of the district, beyond the boundaries that people were allowed to hunt for food, and has become pretty skilled at hunting with a bow and arrow. Often sneaks off with her friend Gale, who's about her same age. And there's another boy, Peta, in the area, son of the baker there in the town. One of the distinctive things about the times are that there has emerged this annual tradition of a spectacle contest called the Hunger Games, in which 2 children from each of the districts are chosen to fight to the death with each other. And the winner receives prizes and is set up economically for the rest of their lives. And that's the only person who survives the contest. When Katniss's younger sister, who she'd been working so hard to protect, found her name being drawn, Katniss, wanting to protect her sister, volunteered to take her place. Peeta was the other boy selected. And Gale had to stand by as they were taken off to the Hunger Games. The story, of course, develops in all kinds of ways from there. But the reason I see this story as a useful metaphor for this aspect of the Advent message, it's because it's also depicting those who are struggling to make meaning in their lives while they struggle beneath the values of panem, the values of, if you will, empire. And that's it's a fraught term for some. It's a precarious term, but it's one that speaks in particular ways, and I'll say more about that in a moment. I'll note to start with, though, that this story emerged in the mind of the author, Suzanne Collins, who had previously been active in several Catholic social justice organizations, to give context about her perspective. She said she got the idea for Panem and for the Hunger Games after flipping between 2 TV channels one night. This was almost 2 decades ago. One was showing news coverage of the war in Iraq that waged at the time. The other broadcast one of those contest-based reality TV shows like Survivor or The Amazing Race or one of those. Different though they were, she saw in both programs these values of empire, values of control, motivated by fear that allowed those in power to exert their power over others. The fear that underlied those competitions was what inspired Collins to write that now famous, ironic slogan for the Hunger Games, "May the odds be ever in your favor," implying, of course, that the odds are not in anybody else's favor. And she saw, especially in the reality TV show, the spectacle and competition that reminded her of Rome, reminded her of Panem et Circenses, of bread and circuses. And the 3 characters that I named each differed from one another in how they coped with the values of empire, though none of them took it for granted. Gale hated the imperial forces so badly that at first he advocated fleeing them. He said to Katniss that the morning of the drawing of names that they should just run off together into the woods and make a life of it for themselves. They could hunt, they'd be fine. Katniss rejected that idea because she had her family to think about, her mother, but especially her younger sister. And caring for them was what was most important to her. And Peeta, later on, after being picked, talked about how he struggled to be clear on who he really was and how he could avoid letting Panem's Hunger Games force him into changing into somebody he did not want to be. As he said the night before the game started, if I have to die, if I'm going to die, I still want to be me. And I should note that Gale changed to a different take in his hatred of the empire of Panem and their forces later when he joined the resistance against it. All 3 of them ultimately rejected the values. Gale in favor of justice for everyone in his district, ultimately. Katniss for the love of her family and their needs. Peeta for the integrity to be who he was, who he chose to be. Okay. So that's the Hunger Games. What does all this have to do with Advent, really? Well, let's say a little bit more about Advent in a bit. Rest assured, we will get there. I first, though, want to invite you for this next hymn to rise as you're able. And this one will have the words on the screen It's Let Christmas Come.
Let Christmas come, its story told, when days are short and winds are cold. Let Christmas come, its lovely song, when evening soon and night is long. Let Christmas come, its great star glow, a quiet sin, he sleeps below. Let Christmas come, its starlight beam, love born again, a quiet dream. Let Christmas come, grant us its peace. When night is dim, our light increase. Let Christmas come, the light now sings and shares the joy the season brings.
Would you all join me in a moment of prayer and reflection? The God that we know when we see love and kindness and family, that mystery named and unnamed, be with us on this day. And hold all those who live in hope today. Hold all those who have a dream for a better world, a more kind world, a more just world. Hold all those for whom Christmas is not a joyful time, but a time to get through. All those who are worried about health or family or this institution or these institutions. Hold all those who have lost too much, who miss too much. May this church be a beacon for all who need it. May all of you be a beacon for all who need it. May you know peace. Amen.
In days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. Many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares. They shall beat their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore."
If any of you are looking at the order of service that was emailed out yesterday, you'll see that was a change in the reading. And as preparations were finalizing yesterday afternoon, last night for this service, it just came clear that that was a better match. That theme of beating swords into plowshares, it speaks of what it means for us to hope for a better world to come. And I'll add that after the first service, I was informed of something that somehow I had missed previously, even when I had interned here before. Many of you are familiar with the story of Yoshi Hashitori and how he, while living with a family as an exchange student, a family in this church, was shot and died in 1992. What I had not somehow realized before is that an event occurred at this church to symbolize the hope for peace in the wake of that shooting, at which a weapon, a firearm, was obtained, and a metal artist, a metal worker, was brought in and literally melted the gun down and beat it into a plowshare. And it's my understanding that it's buried just the other side of this circle window, still to this day. It's a dramatic reminder of what it can mean for us, both symbolically and practically, to be working towards a better world. Because the act of turning one gun into a plowshare may itself be symbolic, but it's accompanied by the testifying that many members of this community did about gun violence, even before Congress, and the work as well as the hoping for a better world to come. This idea of the coming of what our Christian friends would call the kingdom of God, what we may often call the beloved community. And that Advent can be a time of waiting in preparation for that coming, echoes so well with what the prophets in Jewish tradition had to speak about, including Isaiah. That passage is one of the passages that's read in Christian churches as the Old Testament passage during Advent. And the image in the slide at the beginning of it is of a statue inspired by that verse that's outside the building of the United Nations in New York City. But all of this speaks about defeating, working against, and living past the prime of this way of being in the world that early Christians certainly knew and is still talked about today as empire. And it's a loaded word, empire. It's one that evokes strong emotional reactions in some people. Most of us think of it strictly in political terms, a widespread group of countries all under the rule of a single government. Well, that's certainly what it meant to the early Christians, because they were living under a very specific empire, the Roman Empire. It had been the largest government in Europe's history 2,000 years ago. Some 150 to 200 years ago, the British Empire was spread all across the world. And at some fictional point in the future, Panem's capital certainly held an imperial kind of rule over its 12 districts. But there's a lot more to empire than politics. Yeah, governments are widespread, their authority centralized, but empires impose their rule, they force their power on other places while also forcing their values. Today, those forces of empire may or may not be connected to a government. They may be part of a widespread financial rule of large multinational corporations, the cultural rule of a worldwide mass media. Now, I name those examples with a bit of hesitancy. I know that each of those factors can be and have been twisted into conspiracy theories that are far more oppressive than what I'm longing to talk about today. And yet, it's a reminder that living under these imperial values can feel overwhelming, can feel oppressive as it is, at very least feel dark for many. But I find helpful the words of Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who, among other things, wrote a popular book in the 1990s, Women Who Run with the Wolves. As she said, in any dark time, there is a tendency to veer toward fainting over how much is wrong or unmended in the world, to fall into being weakened by dwelling on what is outside your reach, by what cannot yet be. She urges us, though, do not focus there. That's spinning the wind without raising the sails. No, it's more about, in this time of waiting for another world, finding the resilience to persevere, finding, if you will, the ways to cope. And a couple of other quotes from Clarissa Pinkola Estes are helpful here. We are needed. We are needed. That is all we can know. And though we will meet resistance, we more so will meet great souls who will hail us, love us, and guide us, and we'll know them when they appear. She adds, ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist with some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. And she adds, one of the most calming and powerful actions you can do to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times. I'll add that a few years ago, I took a workshop on what's sometimes called servant leadership. That's how to lead others by serving them. They discussed in the workshop many aspects of leadership, including what servant leadership looks like in the context of contemporary forces of empire. And they actually used the word empire to refer to it. And they noted that in empire's culture, possessions, prestige, power, all became scarce resources for individuals to fight for or to do without, living with scarcity, living in shame, living under coercion. The workshop facilitators invited leaders instead to serve in faith from a deep sense of love for yourself, for others, for the world, and thereby exercising your power with those you lead, not over them. But how do we do that? How do we lead power with when the forces and values of empire and power over are so strong? I'll conclude with that in a bit. But first, I invite you for this carol to remain seated. It's a longer one and a little slower one. But let's join together in singing. Again, if you prefer your hymnals, it's number 225. And this is the one that the reading from our Advent wreath lighting is inspired by, particularly its second verse, O come, Emmanuel.
O come, Emmanuel, and with your captive children dwell. Give comfort to all exiles. to temper knowledge with our care, to render every act of prayer. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come within us hope to dwell.
Well, we do share with one another in so many ways as we worship together. Let us make a tangible expression of that sharing as we prepare to receive the morning's offering for, yes, the continued good works of this congregation, but also as we now do every Sunday, sharing with an organization in the community doing good works in harmony with our Unitarian Universalist values. And I'm pleased to add that we have a video today featuring a face familiar to some of us that will give us information about the organization with which we're sharing our plate this month, all the Sundays this month, Assisi House.
Hi, my name is Leslie Grower, and I'm founding president of Assisi House. We're so grateful for the opportunity to tell you about the work that we do at Assisi House. We work with vulnerable communities, and we bridge the gap between research and reality. And we bridge that gap through the creation of programs, of content, of policy papers, and of course, through social justice art. We've been around since 2016, formally, but informally, we can brag about having over 30 years of collective research, art, and interviewing experiences. We are happy to tell you that we're located on Brakely Drive, 2924 Brakely Drive, Suite B, and that whenever we do projects, you're definitely going to be hearing about us. So please visit us at www.assisihouseinc.org. That's www.assisihouseinc.org. Thank you.
The offering is now gratefully received. Those three main characters of the Hunger Games, Katniss, Peeta, Gale, they each tried to find their own ways to live in Panem, to live in Empire. Well, the citizens of the capital did the same, albeit their ways of living in the Empire was very different. And ultimately, we all have to do likewise, to search for ways to cope, to live our lives meaningfully in the spite of values that are so far removed from us in some cases and so imposed upon us in others. One option is to live like the capital dwellers, And don't get me wrong, sometimes we need to recharge, but if you find yourself binging on food while watching mindless entertainment, the question to ask is, what values am I buying into? Are they the values of empire? Or perhaps this is just a respite to recharge, to re-engage with the challenges ahead, but it could also be that I'm giving up my power as a person, as a community member, as a citizen, in order to enjoy the food and the spectacles. So am I taking the forces of empire for granted and thus making it easier for them to exercise that power over me as I pretend not to notice? Well, I think one of the best lessons we can learn from the Hunger Games, and especially from these three characters, is that the powers that be, political, economic, and/or cultural forces and values, opposing them will look different at different times, and that there is value in each of their three ways of doing so, different ways in which they can be good. Sometimes we need to claim the integrity to be who we are in spite of the values that differ from us, the way that PETA did. In the ways that so many of our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters, so many of our queer and trans siblings and friends do when over and over they make the hard choices to come out of the closet, to be authentic about who they are, even when many people falsely would tell them they shouldn't. Tell us we shouldn't. Sometimes we need to work around the values to care for those we love, the way Katniss did, the way countless impoverished families in our current economy have to make hard choices over and over, fighting to meet the needs of their families and their loved ones in the face of the kind of serious inflation and substandard salaries and working conditions we find in the 21st century, in the year 2021 especially, that are leading in part to the so-called Great Resignation that we're hearing about. And sometimes we actively need to oppose those powers and values of empire, the way Gail spoke of doing, the way has happened by countless people of all walks of life, filling public spaces in recent years, be they Occupy sites, Black Lives Matter protests, pride marches, women's marches, and so on, all insisting that another way is possible. Because ultimately, when we stand up, work, and speak out against these imperial forces and values, from whatever source they may be imposed, we're empowering ourselves, we're empowering our loved ones, and we're empowering our larger communities to live lives of greater meaning, of greater integrity, love, and justice. And so, as we continue in this Advent season to reach for a future in which these powers of empire no longer hold power over people, I conclude with an unironic hope. May the odds be ever in all of our favors. So may it be. Amen. And let us join together in song one more time, rising this time as you're able. If you want your hymnals, it's number 228, 228, Once in Royal David City.
Once in royal David city stood a lonely cattle shed, where a mother lay her baby in a manger for his bed. So may we, when life turns hard, find in love our stay and guard.
And so as we go forth from this sacred time and place, may our lives be graced with blessings of freedom, of wholeness. For though this worship now ends, so begins our service. Let us go forth then and find ever new ways to serve this hurting world in the spirit of love. Thank you for joining us. Go in peace.